Auschwitz, perhaps the darkest chapter in human history. In this, the 100th episode of Heart of Poland, we talk to Barbara Wojnarowska, who was sent to Auschwitz as a little girl and became the victim of the so-called Angel of Death, Josef Mengele. If you're a parent, if you're a compassionate human being, then Barbara's story will break your heart forever.
The shouts, the screams, I still remember that. I had no sister, no brother, nobody. That's mean, I have to survive. If you would be my mother, you will never do it to me. Can you imagine her feelings and mine?
Pani Barbara Wojnarowska, thank you so much for joining us in the Heart of Poland for our 100th episode. It's been a while before we met each other. We've spent a lovely morning together, and I've been so looking forward to meeting you. You're really quite a wonderful person. It's now time for our viewers to see that. Pani Barbara, how did you as a young child, 3.5 years old I think, end up in the worst place on earth, Auschwitz?
Yeah, I was a very young child. I was 3.5 years old when they took us from the Warsaw Uprising to Auschwitz. First we went to the temporary camp, which was Pruszków. Exactly, I can't tell you for how long we've been in Pruszków, but it must be a couple of days. And then, of course, we haven't, good luck, and we've been designated to go to Auschwitz. And we arrived to Auschwitz with the first transport, which left from Warsaw Uprising with civilians on the 12th of August in 1944. And I was 3.5 years old.
So in one horrible sense, you've been lucky to actually get out of Warsaw because tens of thousands of civilians and young children were murdered there. But in the very worst direction to go to Auschwitz. Do you have any small recollection of that terrible day when you're separated from your parents?
Actually, yes, just a little bit, because if I will tell you that I remember everything, then I will be just a big liar. It is impossible. But I still remember, I still hear, even until today, it's 75 years after, I say, that voices, of these, tools, this metallic, tools from this wagon, horrible. And things which I will never forget, it's a rival to Birkenau, because it wasn't Auschwitz, it was a Birkenau. And we arrived to this railway ramp, which is called now, Judenrampe. But it wasn't, exactly like that, because, the day we arrived, there was no transport of Jewish people. It was over. The last one, they've been Hungarian transports. And, but we Poles also, we arrived to the same place. And that was horrible, to living, the wagons, and being separated from the families, the children, and parents, the shouts, the screams, I still remember that. And even until today, if somebody shouts a little bit louder, then I am frightened, really. It stays.
Just that moment alone, just that one moment, that half an hour, that hour of being separated is trauma beyond most modern people's comprehension. And yet, you then have to stay there as a girl, separated from your parents, and with this group of children. What were the Germans intending to do with these children and you yourself as well? Difficult to say,
but I don't know why they took us, civilians, the children, the elderly people, to Auschwitz. Why? Why they did it? What they wanted to achieve? Kill us? Keep us? I don't know. But for us it was horrible, especially for children. Can you imagine? You grown, in the family like mine. It was quite a wealthy family, and I had everything, and then You came, there is no mother, there is nothing, no toys, sweet word from mother or nanny, nothing.
How did the other children treat you? Because there were older children there as well.
That is a very difficult, to say, but I don't have a very, it wasn't very nice because some of the children, the elderly children, they've been 14, 16 years old. Of course, it was a war, it was horrible conditions. But, we're small, they've been really badly treated. I had no sister, no brother, nobody. That's mean, I have to survive. And it was difficult to survive, to grab a food, which, little piece of bread, which sometimes, the maybe older child, was hungry, was taken away. You can't do anything about what you can do, bite, kick. Difficult. I don't think so. It was a big friendship, between these children. Even today, since years I was trying to find the children who've been on the same block than me. It was impossible that somebody admitted that was. And one day, maybe, I wasn't very prudent, and I said, oh, I would like to see, the one, who was kicking me always, and, not being very, nice to me, rather nasty. Maybe somebody was frightened, that I will recognize, but I don't remember, that was a very good period. Why maybe I am a little bit restrictive, to make a friendship with other prisoners, they've been children. Because I said, oh, maybe it's that one who was beating me, or who wasn't very, kind to me. And I said, oh, better I keep away.
And of course, you're starving, you're unwashed, you're dirty, the most filthy conditions possible, and you're coming into a harsh winter. Do you remember much of that winter of 44, 45?
I remember, that we've been called on the appeal, that we have to stand like other people. It was quite cold. And of course, we had no winter clothes, nothing, all these, horrible, rugs, covering us. I don't know. I just don't know how we survived. And probably if we are still alive today, that means we must have very, good health, strong health.
Pani Barbara, you were in 3 different blocks, and eventually you end up in block 16A, I believe, which is where the so-called Angel of Death, Dr. Josef Mengele, was performing inhuman operations on people.
Yeah, the block of Dr. Mengele was a block Revir, that was a hospital. I think it was a second block. And this block, I don't know why I landed in this block. Probably I was not very well, and they decided to move me to this Revir. And that was a block of Dr. Mengele. And I was a, Polish child, blonde hair. And probably, as I know from the doctors Polish doctors who worked on this block together with him, that, he always kept eye on me. No, this blondish, blue-eyed girl, etc. But we had a little, story with him, because one day, I think, why he did it, I don't know. He brought me just an apple. And I was on the last floor of this, bed, they call it koya. And he gave me this apple, just put hand. And I took this apple, and I crushed on it, and just and he said, "Shkap." And of course, can you imagine what happened, But even, he was furious and of course gave me, grabbed me down, gave me, a few kicks, but I'm still alive. And then suddenly, after the war, I was asking my mother, what happened to me, why I did it. And my mother said, home, during the war, we've been always calling German Skop. And probably, in the memory of the child, 3.5 child, Skop. It's a German, that was a Skop.
Mm. And at the same time, your parents are also trying to struggle to stay alive, separated from each other and separated from you. What happened to your parents?
My mother, she was taken the same time because whole family was taken. Not only family, but also a friend of the family. And she was a Jewish lady, but with a Catholic papers. She worked for a Jewish organization in Warsaw. And all of us, we went. And of course, my mother and Tante Genia, they've been separated from me. They went to the women blocks. The father, of course, was a man. And I don't know how my mother managed, but finally, with the help of her friends, she became to be a nurse. She never was dreaming to be a nurse, but she learned and she was a nurse. That means she had easier access to me. She could, pass from one block to other one, and sometimes, to pass me some food, etc., to see me. My father was taken to other part, and short after he was transferred to other camps, and finally he was liberated when he was in Dachau. And, but all of us, we survived. And the last one who came back from Germany, because my father, after the war, to work first for an American mission. He knew quite well German, and they took him, when they liberated, certain camps, to be a translator. And then he worked for the Polish mission, also helping the Polish prisoners, ex-survivors, to be repatriated to Poland, etc. That means all of us, we met together in 1948 in Poland.
Yes. Do you have any other memories of the camp?
Not really. Quite a few, but not very important. What I know, that it's from the discussions my mother, or meetings my mother had after the war with the other French prisoners. That's mean, was listening to them and etc. But I regret today that I couldn't even, to write down what they've been saying. But it was quite horrifying.
But you do know that your parents, before the uprising, had been active in helping Polish Jews survive in Warsaw. Can you talk about that?
Yes. They've been helping, especially Polish actors who've been in ghetto, because they had a restaurant club which called Gospoda Włóczęgów. And of course, they've been collecting money and trying to get into ghetto to pass the money, pass some foods to help their friends, Jewish French actors. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you survive Auschwitz and you end up in a sanatorium after the war, where you then find out, or you're later informed, that you'd actually been operated on by Dr. Mengele. He'd experimented on you, something that you weren't aware before you got to the sanatorium. What do you know that Dr. Mengele did to you as a young girl?
The things, after, the medical files, that was a problem, they put some, bacteria into my lungs. And I still have, whole my life, I had a problem with my lungs, and even to today, it's getting worse and worse. And the capacity of my lungs, they are about 35%. That means it's quite low capacity. That means I have to be very careful. But I still manage. And then also what the problem was, a problem with my eyes. And I still have a problem. Even doctor said, when you've been child, probably it was some. I said, look, I don't know. I was in Auschwitz. Ah, okay. That explains everything. But
and you're at the sanatorium and finally reunited with your mother, but after so many years of separation as such a young child.
It was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing. I think it was one of the most horrible moments in my life, and I don't wish any mother and any child, to go through. I still remember this day. It was in Sanatorium, and the nurses, they came to me and they said, "Oh, Barbara, you have a visitor." I said, visitor, what is a visitor, And they, dressed me up, put nice, dress on me, etc. And finally I came to the room, and was a lady, and said, Barbara, it is your mother. And then, I was very astonished, that was 47. That means I was already 6 years old. And then I said, oh, one mother less, one mother more. We call them, all these nurses, mamushka. I said, oh, one more mamushka. And then my mother, she said to me, no, Basha, I am your mother. And then I said, okay, then you have to prove me, if you are my mother. And will you believe or not, we've been proving ourselves for my life. Like a parents, like a mother, the child, there's something wrong. The mother was, screaming, and I was telling her, see, if you would be my mother, you will never do it to me. Can you imagine her feelings and mine? And it was like that, till she passed away. And today, I really, regret.
Pani Barbara, we'll probably come to that in a moment, but I know there's people around the world who, many years in the future, will continue to say that Auschwitz was not as bad as all that. In fact, you met people who even said that to you after the war, and it's something which people find hard to believe, the insanity, the madness, the cruelty, the wickedness. What do you say to people who doubt even that Auschwitz was a camp?
It was a horrible place. I don't wish anybody to go through. Can you imagine? I'm just saying to all people listening to us, I'm talking as a child. Can you imagine the lost childhood? No childhood. It's like, part of your life which was cut. It's impossible to recuperate. Small child living without doll, without toy, without food, without, little, piece of chocolate, without, fruit, nothing. That was horrible. But I met in my life people who can't believe that Auschwitz existed. I remember when I was at the university, it was in Paris, and I had colleagues from different countries. And one of them, they've been two Germans, not because they've been Germans, that's happened. And I remember one day we went for a coffee in Quartier Latin, and I don't know, for some reasons, we started to talk about the war. And one of these German colleagues, he said, oh, I remember, when my dad came, for a permission from Stalingrad. It was a big, joy, home, etc. And then I looked at him and I said, you are lucky that your father came and you met your father. But can you imagine about millions of people, especially Polish people, who couldn't, meet their parents? What's about people who've been in concentration camps? And then my colleague, in my age, He said, it is impossible, that it's a, just a propaganda. I said, no. I said, I am propaganda. I was in Auschwitz. And then, this colleague, looked at me and said, it wasn't such a bad place, look, it looks splendid, fantastic, Yes, it is. It was a very good sanatorium. And a cut discussion because there was no point. But then I realized that a lot of people, they just don't want to admit that what happened in Poland, in the camps in Poland. And I think, that is maybe, the fault of the Polish governments consecutive after the war, even also the medias after the war, there was not enough information about. Even today, they are still, lacking some informations.
Pani Barbara, you've led a fascinating life. You've done some amazing things. Colourful is how I describe it, flying around the world and jumping out of aeroplanes and all sorts of other mad adventures. And I wonder if you could talk now to the 4-year-old girls of the future. So I've got a 4-year-old girl, almost the same age as you were when you were forced to go into that camp. If you could talk to 4-year-old girls in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time, what would your message to those 4-year-old girls be about the life they should lead and the values they should believe in?
What I will say, what I would like to transmit everybody on this world, not more wars, not more refugee camps, peace. Just try to live in peace and understand, each other. No distinctions about, the religions, about the colors, but try to live normally, just normally. And myself, I was fighting for that all my life, working, visiting, refugee camps, in all over Europe, Asia, etc. And I will tell you that it's not a good thing. And I remember when I went to the last camp I visited, it was a camp on the border of Jordania and Syria. It was horrible, just horrible. And, maybe I was too sensitive, like a child who was in the concentration camp. But these camps, makes me sick. How it is possible that it still exists? And sometimes, it was like a result of the actions of people who very often survived from the concentration camps during the Second War. And I don't agree with that. Maybe, I don't know.
As a young lawyer, you went, I think, to a war crimes trial and attended the trial of a SS. You were
yes,
watching the trial?
I wanted always to be a lawyer, and I always wanted to participate in the trial of the SS. And I managed to be present during the trial of really the war criminal Barbie. That was in France, in Lyon. And I observed this trial, and I was disgusted. I wanted to see the eyes of this person. And there was nothing, nothing. He never admitted that he was guilty. Having confessed to him, the people, who was, persecuting the family of the people who killed, who they tortured. Nothing, no regrets. That is horrible. That is horrible.
Looking back now on your life, how do you deal with that kind of trauma?
You know, of course, you know, we try to forget, not forgive, because it is impossible to forgive. But we're trying to live normally, just normally. Myself, I think I manage, but for example, when I'm going once or twice per year to Auschwitz for different commemorations, it's coming back. And it's very difficult. But finally, you know, myself, I think that it's like an obligation to go and to show that we've been here, you know, and we survived, and to give like a warning to people what happened. And especially the Polish people, we are in a really, you know, difficult position, because can you imagine, until today we haven't received any recompensation, nothing. And even though, you know, we have a big words, you know, the Chancellor, the President of Germany is coming to Poland to different commemoration, even, you know, taking off their shoes, you know, and begging us to forgive, etc. The words. And they don't realize that very often, you know, these survivors, at the end of the month, you know, they have a difficulties, you know, to buy even medicaments. Especially then other group of survivors, they have a better financial recompensation. That means, you know, something have to be done. I don't know. I don't know.
Do you dream of the camp?
Yes, I can't watch the films about Auschwitz. It's impossible, because, you know, then I have 2-3 nights, you know, like a nightmares, trying to avoid.
And when you first went back in the 1960s, you had to run from the barracks because you couldn't stand it. Can you mention that experience? You went into the room with the thousands and thousands and thousands of shoes. What did you see there?
That was horrible. That was horrible. I never wanted to go back to Auschwitz, even to visit it, but it happened. That was due to my work, and I went in mid of 60s. And it was a delegation of the officials, you know, from international organization called Pagwash. And we went. And when I came to the place, when I see, you know, like a gablot with a children's shoes, I escaped. I couldn't stand it anymore. It was impossible. I couldn't believe, but it was impossible. And since then, I decided not to go anymore. But finally, I came back in 2005, I think, yes, for one of the commemoration. There was a friend of my husband who convinced me to go. That was a Mrs. Simon Weil, who was a friend of family of my husband. And she said, Simon said, you know, Barbara, you must go, you know, you can't, you know, hide, you know, all the time. You have to face it, try. What I did. And since then I am coming, you know, for a different commemorations, you know, and I started to observe. And also I decided to talk to the prisoners from the first transport, second transport, to the older people. And I wanted to listen to their stories, but from them, the real stories. And I have to say that I managed to have a kind of friendship, you know, with these older prisoners. And just, you know, it was a great thing, you know, to listen to their stories. Because I know what they wanted to say, and what they said, it was a truth. It wasn't twisted, you know. And then I understood their fight, you know, and they worry. And one of them, you know, told me I don't know when it was, but it was maybe 2010 or something like that. We had a discussion and they said, yes, we are still alive, but if we will pass away, who will be fighting, to keep this truth, our testimony? And then, I just told them, I said, don't worry, we children, who've been in Auschwitz, we will do it. And one of them, the man, fantastic man, he passed away a year and a half ago, and he said, if I could believe, but you don't live in Poland. And then I said to him, yes, but maybe one day I will be living in Poland, don't worry, we will manage. And that was why, I decided, to fight for certain historical truths in Auschwitz.
Barbara Wojnarowska, it's been a genuine pleasure to meet you, and thank you for sharing your story. And one of the reasons why we do Heart of Poland is to bring stories that wouldn't necessarily get out in English, and you speak such magnificent English. And I wish we had another hour, but sadly our interview is now coming to an end. Thank you very much for bearing witness and sharing your story of being forced to go to that camp. We call the program Heart of Poland, and I think, Pani Barbara, I might just have found my Heart of Poland, because talking to you today was really quite extraordinary. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much to invite me, because it was a great pleasure. And I think that maybe we will meet, once more.
I very much count on it.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was the 100th episode of Heart of Poland. Week by week, we've been talking to authors, historians, writers, change makers, people making their community better, bolder, bigger, people taking down notes and sharing stories, people living rich, long, exciting lives. Talking to Pani Barbara today was really something I've been obsessing about, I guess, for many months. And to have her here as our 100th guest on the show of Heart of Poland has been a tremendous honour. I'd like to invite you to go back to the many, many other fascinating interviews that we have with people related to Poland's past. I've always tried to get across the story of Poland's tragic, complicated, but ultimately, I believe, inspiring past through interviews with people like Pani Barbara, but this really has been an exceptional moment. It's now on you. It's now on you to share this episode with anyone you think might be interested in Barbara's story, and also to go back and look at the other episodes we have. You can find Heart of Poland on thefirstnews.com and the First News social media. Share it on, send it to someone you think might be interested, tag them in the comments, and be a part of discovering the Heart of Poland. I'll see you again for another episode of Heart of Poland.